Hi everyone, thank you so much for joining me today. Today we're painting this beautiful negative space watercolor. We'll be using black, bright green, and blue, a size 12 round brush, and a size 8 round brush. The first step is to create a wash, and I'm using about 12 brushfuls of water, and then just enough of the blue watercolor to make a very light tea consistency wash. You can use your size 12 round brush to put down the wash, but I highly recommend getting an oval wash brush if you do not have one yet. As you can see, it picks up a lot of watercolor or a lot of water, it holds a lot of it. And so it is a lot easier to get it down on your paper in a shorter period of time. And you also cause less disruption on the surface of your paper, and it's just very gentle to it. So once that wash has covered the whole paper, you'll want to drop in bits of that blue, which as it's drying wet on wet will have a nice soft look, and I'm making the look even softer by going into the blue a little bit and spreading it around. That way it gives it an even softer drying look than just the little drops, but you can leave it as just the little drops and have more of a texture to it as well. So when it's completely bone dry, then you want to decide what kind of leaf shape you want. For the last one that I did, I used a very small leaf shape, but the smaller the leaf shape, the more time it will take. So I'm choosing to use a bit of a larger leaf shape for this one. I start by showing you what it looks like to trace the leaf shape on the paper, as you can do that as well. But I found that it is easier to trace the leaf shape after you cut it out of maybe a cardstock or a scrap piece of your watercolor paper, because the leaves have a little bit of texture to them and it just makes it more difficult to trace a lot of them. So I highly recommend tracing from a paper cutout. It's just a lot faster that way. And then as I work, I am making sure to add in the stems to attach the leaves to the stems, as I really like that look. And for the stems, I'm making sure to leave a little like a pathway of where the stem is, because you're going to be painting around that. So it just means you need to put one line on either side of where the stem is, so that you remember not to paint in that area. You want to keep going with your cutout leaf shape, or you can also just hand draw the leaf shapes. You don't need to trace. I just thought this was a more simplified way to do it, until the whole paper is pretty well covered with the leaf shapes. I am making a wash with the green, and again about the same 12 brushfuls of water, testing it out on a scrap piece of paper just to make sure it is the darkness that I would like it to be, the hue that I want. And then I suggest starting from a corner or a side of the paper, as it just makes it a bit easier, in my opinion, rather than starting in the center, but either way is fine. And you'll want to keep your brush full of that watercolor, so you want to dip back into the watercolor many times, as you want to keep it very wet so that you don't have a lot of boundary water drying lines. So you want to keep your brush nice and wet, but every once in a while you'll probably need to brush it off onto the paper towel when you need a little bit more water control in the areas around the stems. Once your second layer is completely dry, you'll go ahead and draw in your second layer of leaves. If you need to erase, you can, as long as that paint is completely dry where you're drawing with the pencil. And you're going to do a very similar design as you did with your first layer of leaves. You'll want to overlap the blue leaves that you've already placed in and fill in a lot more of that negative space or that area around your first set of leaves. You don't want to overlap the leaves that you're drawing in with this layer. You want to make sure that you're not overlapping as you draw them in, but you do want to overlap the leaves that you've already drawn in. Once you're happy with your design, you can go ahead and create a third wash, and this one I'm using just the same as the first wash but a little bit darker. So it's a nice thin wash of blue watercolor, but instead of having it be a barely there blue, I add more of the paint from the pan, so it is a more of a rich blue. It is a darker hue, and this way it is creating that sense of depth. So we're getting darker as we go. Each layer is getting a bit darker than the layer before it. And again, you're going to want to make sure you have a lot of water on your brush as you go, and just being more careful in those areas where you're going around the stems. So that's why my paper towel is so dark with the blue now, is because I've gone around a lot of stems with this layer, and each time I go around the stems, I want to have more water control with my brush. So I'm using the paper towel to brush off a lot of that water, a lot of that paint, so that I have more control around the stems. So now for this third layer of leaves, you're going to do it just the same way as you did the first and the second layer, where you are filling in the areas of negative space or that blue area, and drawing just around the leaf shape, where the leaf shape is on top of the blue area, and not drawing in your light blue or your light green leaves. You're just going around your leaf shape in that darker blue area. So now I am creating the wash for the very last layer, and I'm using my black and that same blue and creating a darker shade of blue. We are going darker and darker as we go, which gives the illusion of depth to the painting. So make sure you try it out on your little scrap piece of watercolor paper. And then for this last layer, because we now have a lot more of these small little negative spaces to fill and less of the larger areas, I am using that size 8 brush, and you can use an even smaller brush for these really tiny, delicate areas, just so that you have more water control, you have more control over your brush so that you're not painting into the leaves or on top of the stems. And then for the center area, it's a bit of a larger area to fill, or if you have any other areas that are larger to fill, you might want to use a little bit of a bigger brush, maybe the size 8 brush, being instead of a size 2 or a size 0 for the larger areas, so that you don't have brush strokes that are visible. And as you go around, you want to make sure to be on the lookout for those little teeny tiny areas. I almost forgot this very last one. I had to catch myself at the last minute to remember to fill it in. It was kind of hiding down there. Once you have found all those little teeny tiny areas and filled in all those little tiny negative spaces, you can stop there. It's beautiful as it is. Or you can, like myself, put in a little bit of sparkle, a little bit of metallic glitter. I'm using a metallic, very fine point. I think it's called the Ultra Fine Point Painter's Marker, metallic marker. And I'm using this marker to put in little stars so that it looks like you're maybe underneath a bush or a tree and you're looking out at the night sky. So to do this with a marker, you want to press down straight up and down, which will give you a nice little circle. I was trying to do it to the side for the camera and it'll give you more of an oval mark. So you want to do straight up and down for those little circle look that I have here. And I'm filling in all of the negative space so that it kind of has more of an illustrative children's book look to it, where it gives you the idea of a night sky. I recently bought, they're called Cotman Watercolor Metallic Pocket Set. And this little blue paint is called the iridescent blue. And I'm using this iridescent blue to give the leaves just a bit of magic, a bit of shine and shimmer. Also just an excuse to use these metallic watercolors, as I've been looking for ways to use them lately. If you're interested in more metallic watercolors, let me know, because I would love an excuse to do a tutorial with them. I hope you get a chance to try this out for yourself, and I look forward to seeing you next time.